talking a lot about some of the details of this bill, and again, I can't emphasize this enough that we aren't attorneys. We're literally reading this like everyone else, but it is our job to advise clients up to a certain level. Anything beyond legal consultation, they can even seek advice of an attorney. But from a business consultant standpoint, I want to give them as much information as possible, and then give them tools and resources to navigate some of these issues. So one thing that we know is in play for a lot of business owners is insurance, whether that be property insurance, general liability insurance, work comp obviously is a mandatory insurance requirement. What about EPL? And a lot of people aren't really up to speed about employment practices liability. Can you tell us, would that insurance coverage have any bearing on some of the things that are coming down the pipe potentially with this assembly bill? Is there an opportunity for someone to transfer some of that risk to an insurance carrier, especially given the landscape of insurance in California right now? You can talk about that better than I can, obviously.
Yeah, so employment practices liability insurance, EPLI or EPL, it's exactly that. It's coverage for your employment practices, your best practices as an employer, as a boss, as a management team, from hiring, firing, pay, breaks, all those things can and should be covered by a full risk analysis of your EPLI policy. So if very common claims are harassment. If an employee feels harassed in the workplace and they felt that their company didn't do anything to take care of it or protect them from that, that's a huge exposure that employers are seeing every day, especially in California, which is a very employee-friendly state and a little bit tougher and holds a pretty high standard for employers. So wrongful termination is another thing that can end up in there. Wage and hour is usually a portion of that, which is if employees aren't getting breaks or they're working for you at 2 locations while they're only working 25 hours each. Well, that's over 40 hours a week. It's not 2 part-time jobs. If they're working for one employer, that's an interesting thing that we've seen. I think that the FAST Act will make this coverage harder to get and more expensive from a coverage standpoint.
Now, I'm sorry to cut you off. Is wage and hour typically included in a policy, or is it normally excluded? Or is that a coverage that's standard in one of those policies?
It's becoming more common for it to be excluded or very limited in the amount of coverage that you can get. If you have $1 million policy, most likely you're only going to have $100,000 of coverage for it. Is pretty standard, and it also is usually it's limited to defense costs as well. If you actually owe an employee back pay, you have to pay them. The insurance companies can't pay.
Insurance is not going to provide any coverage for you doing something wrong.
Correct.
So the question I have is, let's say this bill does pass, right? And I'm assuming there's going to be a period of time where you have to get up to code or up to standard. But what if the individual franchisee doesn't know that the bill's passed because they're not, up to date with the laws, or they don't have consultation. They don't have someone like you or I coming in and telling them this is what's going on. Would there be any potential coverage for that if I just forgot to raise my minimum wage? If the assembly bill passed and I've got 60 days to get, my employees up to the new standard,
right,
wage standard, because it's not like your local minimum wage. I don't, because the local minimum wage impacts all businesses.
Right.
This is particular to whether or not you have 100 locations nationwide.
Right.
Would EPL cover something like that potentially?
It's going to come down to a case by case and a full claim, and unfortunately with new legislation, we haven't seen any sort of case law to go off of on how those claims would be covered or adjusted by the carrier. I do think, unfortunately, when something like this comes up, hopefully most coverage doesn't change, but we want to make sure from an insurance broker standpoint. I look at this from two bad lights on this. Is one, is this going to increase claims? Most likely, yes, which is either going to increase limitations on coverage. The carrier's saying, geez, we're paying a lot of money out due to the FAST Act. How do we limit our coverage here so that we don't have to pay out so many claims? That's a bad thing. And then the other bad thing that's going to happen is more claims means more losses, means more, the carrier's losing money, which means they're going to have to increase rates, which in the state of
what's
California.
What's the average retention right now on one of those policies?
The average retention right now, it really, the Bay Area, the Los Angeles area, it's about 25,000 minimum. In the Central Valley and a few locations that the claims aren't as prevalent, we can get it down to 10, but it's definitely getting
increase.
Yeah.
I think one big danger in this, and I literally just thought about this, but let's say you're part of a franchise nationwide. They have 96 locations, and unbeknownst to you, who's an individual franchisee, they just now purchase 5 more somewhere.
Yeah, the franchise development guys and guys and girls, I have a lot of great relationships with them. They're not going to stop selling because of this.
Exactly.
So that's a huge concern. I think that what you're initially buying into will cause issues and challenging renegotiations. The other thing as a franchisor, and again, I recommend everyone reach out to their legal counsel on this, but just make sure that your franchisor coverage and as a franchisor, from a professional advisor standpoint and the directors and officers of the company, you have the proper coverage and you are being as proactive as possible on if and when and how this is going to affect your franchisees.
Yeah, and this could seem like a shameless plug, but I'm not. Get a consultant. Absolutely. Like if you are a business owner, and we're talking about franchisees at this point, but if you're a business owner, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to have either the time or the wherewithal to sit down and look at legislation. Get someone whose job it is to keep up to date with what's going on, and then to communicate that to you, because that's the best way to protect yourself, in my estimation. Whether it be an insurance advisor, an HR consultant, organizational development consultant, legal counsel, someone who can keep you up to speed on what's going on, because you have a business to run. And as much as you would like to sit down and read the headlines every day, most of us aren't doing that.
Absolutely.
That would be my advice. If you are a business owner, specifically if you're impacted by this law, get a consultant, work with a consultant directly, and make sure that you're covered and everything correctly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
1000%.
All right, Tim. Well, that's good information.
Yeah.
Like I said, insurance is one of those risk transfer methods, that business owners can use, and I think really benefits them if they have the right coverages in place.
Yeah, happy to get on any calls and go over any sort of issues or concerns, and make sure that people aren't staying up at night, worried about what's going on and what's covered by their insurance policy.
They're going to stay up at night anyway if they're running a business in California.
Absolutely.